Right. Hello, hello, hello. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the ItCast, Real Talk on Sex, and I am your host, Nika Sherrell. The ItCast is our community outreach podcast that aims to increase diversity in conversations on health and sexuality. Through this work, we are creating a world where all people feel loved, honored, and respected. Please register for this summer's Healing Through Pleasure series starting May 11th with Queen Reverend Mutimi Imani and spiritual guide Asara Sahai. This course will allow you to discover the power of your erotic energy and expand your pleasure. You can get tickets on Eventbrite today. Also, ask us anything. We want to hear from you. Click the link in the comments below to have your questions answered on the show. You can submit them completely anonymously and we will support you. You can also get content, access to our bonus content now on Patreon by checking us out at patreon.com/Nika Sherrell. Go ahead and subscribe to this YouTube channel and share this work with your community. Now let's go ahead and dive in. This week's topic is real talk on how to fuck up better. Yeah. Today in the booth, we have the executive director of Folsom Events, Angel Adeyoha. Angel is a two-spirit, non-binary leatherdyke activist who's been teaching, speaking, and organizing for justice for the last 2+ decades. The intersections of sex, gender, and racial justice is where she puts her attention in the community. They are completely committed to keeping political, anti-capitalist queerness front and center in his work and in his life. Angel, join us on the show.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to be with you.
There you are.
I especially appreciate the thoughtful gender swapping of pronouns. It felt really great. I also wanted to mention that I'm mixed and Indigenous. I'm rooted in the Qualla Boundary in North Carolina, but living out on unceded, stolen Ohlone land in Oakland, California. Same as you, Nika.
Yep.
Neighbors.
Yeah, no, there's a whole lot I have to say about that conversation. Yeah, I didn't even think I was going to go there emotionally today, so we can get into my personal, emotional, geological trauma.
Well, and where those things all meet, right? I think it's a lot of times people are like, oh, well, how is all this related? And I've never been able to pull these things apart. That identity and where I stand is part of all the work I do. And specifically when you're talking about, I guess what led me to make, the concept of how to fuck up better was like sex and transgression, right? Mm-hmm. You're talking about those spaces. Like there's no way to have that conversation without talking about colonization and talking about whose bodies are fair game for what and all the rest. So it's all one thing, all one big long conversation.
Yeah, oh yeah, it really, really is. As I was looking over, like all of the conversation we've been having and hearing you talk about your life and your experiences just a few seconds ago, it really brought up this space in me where I was like, I know that I have Native roots and I completely resist them. Like growing up in the Midwest South, the whole like Trail of Tears conversation, a lot of natives did not like it was bad. It was a shameful conversation. So a lot of them hid amongst like where they could hide with white people, where they could hide with Black people, and you know, like ceased a lot of conversation. And it was frustrating for me growing up because I would hear a lot of Black people say, "Oh no, I'm Indian." And then I was like, well, that's a great way to be ashamed of being Black and to deny it. But
Blackness enters into also to every conversation. Like there is no place on this planet that's not part of what we're talking about. Yeah.
Right. And so it just kind of brought up all this crazy stuff in me. And I'm like, oh, that is 100% colonization, because there's just not any way to allow those pieces to flow together harmoniously. And I love that, like, that's the space you stand in, that's what you create, that's who you are. And seeing and knowing so many people out who are acknowledging that and acknowledging the land and acknowledging the culture and the honor is just, it's really powerful. And so I thank you for bringing that into the conversation, because I don't think we talk about it enough. Like,
yeah, well, our relationship to our bodies and pleasure is rooted to the earth and the land and where we are. And I think one of I was trying to have this conversation about land back on the internet, which I know better, with a very mixed culture group of folks. And as you might imagine, some white people got pretty stirred up about like, well, then what about my house and where will I live? And they just immediately go into this like revenge is going to happen kind of feeling. And what I ended up saying was that you can't have a conversation about how to handle a thing like the earth or the land when you think you can own it, and my culture knows you can't, and knows that we're not, we're not owners of the earth. Like even just saying that, I'm like, what? No. we are of it, and we're stewards of it, and we are in responsible relationship, and it's just not the same thing. And so it's very hard to map those concepts onto each other. But I also think that it is definitively the responsibility of particularly white passing Indigenous folks like myself to always be pushing that conversation forward, because the only way back to any kind of real, as you say, harmonious relationship, place where we're not just destroying our own habitat is by insisting on that stewardship and insisting that that's where we have to return to. And that is what gives us the birthright of pleasure, right?
Yes. That connection, that harmony, that there's something so beautiful in it. And you mentioned earlier, like, that space where sexual pleasure and all these other things align, like that's where a lot of fuck ups happen. So
indeed.
Yeah.
and it's one that we notice a lot because it's so charged, right? Like we are so acculturated to anything based in sexual pleasure being immediately tied to guilt and shame, and also immediately harder to talk about, and something we're not supposed to talk about, and therefore something where there is a ton of room for people to get hurt and harmed and not know how to say it, and also for when they do say it, for it to be brushed aside or diminished or ignored altogether. And I think that's, I think often when we have hard human work to do, that it's good to begin in the places that are most difficult and uncomfortable. Because if we can master, or if we can even get closer, oh gosh, I'm really trying to take that word out of my vocabulary, but if we can improve our skill in the realm of sex and pleasure when it comes to like how we take accountability, then every other aspect of taking accountability in our lives will be easier, because you're starting with the big hard stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Like if we can get it right around like sex and religion and money, we can sort the rest out.
The big three.
Right?
No, that's
The
and
taboo.
it's so powerful because when you look at it, it's like, yes, there are the big and the hard places, and then there are the baby steps, there are those
Mhm.
little moments.
Mhm.
And one of the things when it comes to, well, I talk about this a lot when it comes to allyship, but the truth is when it comes to growth and learning, it's okay to make mistakes. You
Mhm.
have to be willing to make mistakes so that you can grow and learn. If you're
Yeah.
not doing that, you're not growing. And like,
If your failure rate is too low, I think we talked about this one time. If your failure rate is too low, you're not taking the risks necessary to grow. Like if you don't consistently feel like you're failing a chunk of the time at everything, at interpersonal connection, at things you try to do in the world, like if you are always succeeding, you're way back from the edge. You're way back. You're just in the safe zone. And that's it's a place to retreat to recharge, but we're not meant to live there.
No, we're really not. And I chuckle so deeply because I recognize exactly what you're saying. And the truth is it's not about, it's not about that like feeling like you failed all the time. It's not about feeling bad. It's not about like that shame or upset or depression, whatever. No, it's like, oh, hey, I can acknowledge that wasn't quite what I wanted to create in that moment or that experience. Like, oh, I feel some kind of way about that. Let me check what's there, but not, and so it's completely different. And when you said like your failure rate is too low and you're right all the time, there's a little bit of a disconnect from reality. That's just what I'm going to say.
And it's about recontextualizing failure as part of a growth structure. Like it's not, you cannot have growth without failure. And if you are convinced that the only way to deal with failure is to cover it up or hide it, because we live in a intensely like blameful, litigious, capitalist society. And so the only thing to do is be like, never say you're sorry. People love that one here. Is it's inhibiting to growth. And the thing is that any growth that we'll grow regardless. Like we are not static beings, but the growth will be stunted and it won't be satisfying. Like you'll have to do the work anyway. You'll just feel shitty. So why not do the clearing out bit where you actually get to experience your failures as part of the growth, and you get to see how trying something and failing moves you closer to where you want to be.
Right. Yeah, that's how anyone gets better, that training and you get closer to the goalpost, and then, you hit a home run. I know I just mixed all the sports metaphors.
I don't in the slightest. So every time I try to do that, it is very silly. So it'll never work.
Oh my God, sports ball. But everything that we're talking about, perfectionism, it's a sign of the patriarchy. It's a sign of white supremacy. It's this, you have to fit into this perfect box to be seen and, seen as acceptable, seen as good enough, seen as you fit into this society. And if you don't fit into every marker of this extremely long, complicated box, then you're not good enough. And,
the top bits off to fit in.
All the things. So that whole conversation around having to be perfect, it's really quite sad, and it eats away at a multitude of areas within us. So fucking up is okay.
I mean, and the thing that is interesting about how you said about the baby steps and about how we can practice, because all of anything that is like a worthy endeavor that brings you closer to alignment with who you're trying to be, meant to be, etc., is a practice. It's never a thing you're done with. Like you're never done, doing your anti-racist work. You're never done doing your work against the patriarchy and misogyny. Like you're never done. It's not possible to be done, because the minute you go back out into the world, you're bombarded with all of the same programming. So it's I think it's really important to get comfortable with the concept of endless practice, and to know that in that, I think we have been conditioned, again, because all of our models are, patriarchal, colonizer models, right? We've been conditioned to think of it as Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill. It's punishment. It's you have to do the thing over and over. Instead of anytime I'm working in like accountability space with someone, the first thing I try to really like get embedded is the idea that you get to be accountable when people care about the outcome. Because if they didn't care, they would be like, fuck that person. I'm never, like if somebody really hits the wrong spot the first time and you don't have any investment and no desire to see them grow, you're just gonna be like, never again.
Right.
Which is also fine and happens. We've all been that person on both sides of that equation where you hit somebody the wrong way, you rub somebody the wrong way, like, ugh. But understanding that accountability only comes from care.
Yeah.
And that when we talk about accountability, we are so often talking about punishment, but using words like accountability. And what we mean is when we say hold someone accountable, which I don't honestly think I believe in, is that we're not, that person is not a consenting part of the process, right? We're talking about imposing non-consensual punishment because someone behaved in a non-consensual way. So like we're talking about breaking someone's consent because they broke someone else's consent. So it's a punitive model. It's a model that is, that's really specifically about you cause suffering, therefore you must suffer in an equal and reasonable manner so that then everyone can feel better, instead of the concept of becoming accountable, which is really about rebuilding trust with yourself, with possibly the person or people you harmed. And at some point it has to be with your community.
Yeah.
Like where did you break from that that trusting position?
Right. Yeah, where's trust gone out? Where's integrity gone out? How can you, mend those situations? And you said like you're holding someone else to account. Like that's very different than someone seeing and holding themselves to account. Like that is a restorative process versus, like you said, the punitive model, like with our judicial system, we always say you can't fight fire with fire. Like, how is it we so easily know you can't fight fire with fire, and yet we're like, oh, but we're going to heal pain with more pain. Let's just go through this process of damaging everything for eons. But also, we also know that the whole punitive judicial whatever system is also based on slavery and a bunch of other stuff. So there's a lot of structures keeping it in alignment, but accountability is a very powerful and very different process. And I think, like you said, when people hear it, there's an immediate like defensiveness, like, oh, I did something wrong. And like, you want me to what?
Right. Yeah. The never say you're sorry is such an interesting, like, it's such a uniquely, and I use this term with intention, American concept. And when I say, I don't use the word American a lot because of the whole, like, people's lack of acknowledgement of anyone else on the continents called the Americas.
Right.
But there is this specific, it's funny because it's a lot of times people are like, oh, there is no culture. And I'm like, no, the culture is a brand. Right. And so when you're looking for the usual markers of what people who are experiencing colonization would call culture, instead it is this imposed brand. And what you were saying about you have to fit into it, if you're not brand consistent, you will be pressured until either you are or you are punished in some way. And so one of the things that I really encourage folks to look at when they're feeling that like edge of defense and punishment and like, I'm gonna be in trouble, it really hits our like little kid immediate, like, I'm in trouble. Right. And so I really encourage folks to pause. Well, I say that in every setting. Urgency is a function of white supremacy. If you are feeling pressured to take a step and you're not allowed to take a breath and consider, you are being played. You're being pushed around by the system of white supremacy, right? And so that thing where first take a pause and look at who is pulling the levers that you are perceiving of power, right? Like, who are you in trouble with? And at that point, what do they get to do about that trouble, and what are you consenting to? And so I think that often puts people in a more grounded space to then actually be able to look at where they have misstepped, where they have misspoken, where they have acted out of a sense of entitlement. Because when we're trying to describe these systems of, you know, racial hierarchy and gender domination and all of these things, it is the core of all of those is a sense of entitlement to someone else's person, like to someone else's body and mind and self.
Right.
Like the idea that we are entitled to that if the person is a child, or if the person is an elder, or if the person is a woman or not a man, or in some other way deemed in need of being controlled. So when you get into that, that's what sets up the system of chattel slavery. That's what sets up the system of colonization, is this entitlement, right? The idea that one person is entitled to another person's self, labor, existence, all that, right? And so a lot of times when we overstep the moment of recognition, and this is why I think it's so hard, because we have to really look at how we're participating, is like, oh, I was in that moment feeling entitled to this person. I was feeling entitled to their pleasure, to their participation in my pleasure,
to their time, you know?
Right. To their time, or to their opinion, to like them liking me. I'm entitled because I did these 3 nice things for you. Now you have to pay me back by liking me. And it's like we enter immediately into those transactional spaces, especially when it comes to sex and pleasure. And so much of the time, we are not in a defined transactional relationship.
Right. There's no agreement.
Right.
And yet we're already, and that's one of the breakdowns, you know, is that realm of communication. It's like, how much are we actually communicating about things before we get engaged in them? You know, as we're engaging, as we're, you know, developing understandings of each other, and, you know, like just having that set up so that you're going in at least as best informed as you can be.
And also recognizing that humans are not static in any of the ways. And we're also not having any of our interactions outside of the power structures.
Right.
It never exists. So when I've had so many, I was going to try to neutralize this statement, but so many men say to me, well, now I feel worried all the time. I feel like stressed out that I'm going to say the wrong thing and that everyone's going to hate me, or I'm going to say the wrong thing or I'm going to do the wrong thing and someone's going to, you know, tell me I assaulted them. And now I'm in all this worry and all this anxiety and all this risk. And I just am like, great. Now you are experiencing this exchange the way that the other person in the exchange has been experiencing it all along.
Right.
So now you are in the risk with this other human, which is a more real and connected place to be, because before you were insulated from that risk by your privilege and you didn't perceive any risk to yourself. So so this other person was taking on this huge risk burden, assuming that this person, that there's like an imbalance, which there always is, right?
There's no consent.
Right. This person is taking on all the risk balance, you're taking on none. And one of the ways that we can very much understand power flows in our society is money, right? And one of the ways that people often talk about sex is in metaphor of money, right? Sports and money. Right? There's this like things of like, we can understand how the power lays. We can understand what is going on. And one of the things that I really encourage people to look at is that engaging in risky behavior together is one of the ways humans bond. Like, that's not true just about sex, right? That's true about like, doing an adventure together, learning how to swim, or going on a zip line, or doing any of the things that feel like that sense of adrenaline.
Yeah.
Also creates, some sense of shared bonding. And in a lot of sexual situations, one person, or, depending on how many humans you've got in your mix there, is experiencing a higher risk than the other. And what that often means is that communication is, it has to be more strategic, right? And so when people retreat into strategy, they're not really in the space with you. They're in their strategy trying to keep safe, but also trying to get enough of the thing they showed up for. You're in this world of like, oh, everything seems fine. They're saying yes. Everybody looks like they're having fun, right? And so there's, I think, a lot of like confusion, and even like that feeling of being like tricked, of like, oh, but you said I could.
Yeah, and it's like, the whole basis of that is like consent's not black and white. Like you said, people change, like it's a moving target, and things change moment to moment.
Yeah.
Like what was yes, 2 seconds ago actually might be maybe not. Right.
And a lot of times our boundaries are very legible when they're behind us.
Right.
When we just crossed it and we're like, oh, that was not what I expected. Like, I thought that was going to be awesome, and it was terrible. Like that, that moving target, as you say, is like, is better dealt with when both people are in the risk and aware of it together, and are managing it together, and are understanding that when someone hits that spot, the answer is, I'm going to say this a million times, right? Is pause, take an assessment, like check in, and not, well, I was so close. I just was, I was about to have my thing. I was about to experience pleasure in a way I really showed up for. And this is the thing, is like, the feeling that something might be taken from you is, we're back again to that entitlement to someone else's body. The idea that people are objects, and that we're really the main character, and like what they have going on is secondary. And that, I think, is the thing that all of consent culture is trying to break down and reconstitute in a totally different way. In the idea that like really good, really pleasurable sexual interactions have to start with both people being in a similar understanding of what's going on.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So so a couple of things are there for me. You got me when we started talking about brand identity. Like, I don't know if you saw my reaction, but I was like, oh Lord, it's hot in the kitchen right now. Like, this is real. Yeah. Like that whole conversation around like, people are archetypes. Mm-hmm. And what we're doing in this conversation is we're shifting a paradigm, like it's one person at a time, it's one thought at a time. And as long as we keep practicing and growing and moving forward, we're going to shift that paradigm. Mm-hmm. It's taken as long as it's taken for us to get here. And it's not over.
Oh my gosh, we're at like step 0. Are you kidding?
I know, right?
We're at the before step.
Right.
And I think like people really want to be several steps ahead of where we're at. And I get that. We're like, it is hard to begin at every system you encounter is one that is harmful and should be dismantled. Is like, that's a hard reality to sit with and to grapple with. And it is also true that a lot of times we are trying to live in the utopia in our hearts instead of the dystopia in our lives. We're trying to be in the good spot, and that is why we seek pleasure. It's not just the brain chemicals, but it's also trying to like live in the world we want to live in. Yeah. But there is when we try to do it by ignoring the systems, there's a lot of breakdown, and that's where a lot of harm happens. When people try to sidestep the process, which I get the drive. I understand wanting a shortcut. I understand wanting a formula. I understand. This is what people always ask when I do apology work, is like, well, what do I say? And it's funny because I have occasionally, mostly for, kinky reasons, given people, this is the apology that you say. Say it every time until you feel it. and understanding that sometimes, in the same way that any spiritual practice uses repetition, chanting, mantra, that sort of thing, that we can drive concepts into our brain that way. Sure. But it is a surface understanding that will only take you so far. So I'm often almost hesitant to share specifically the handout link that I shared with you. The ideas that like you can formalize this. You can't. What you can do is start overlaying some formula into your brain so you reach for a better option when you are presented with this path. And so that you can ease your brain into the right space where you can actually be, as you said, one person at a time. You can actually be in that space with the person without running away or freaking out or being violent or being, further harmful, which is always an option when apologizing, unfortunately.
I mean, and you know what I got from your work, and this just really, really blew my mind. Before, I think I rarely ever actually apologized. Like, I was ultimately saying what I thought I needed to say to manipulate the person into liking me again.
Right. Seeking forgiveness, which is not the same as like heartfelt repair. But forgiveness feels nice, so I feel you.
Right? It's all about me.
Yeah.
About me.
Yeah. Forgiveness feels lovely. And it's also, it is an easier state to achieve. And so I feel like a lot of times people are like, what? Like, I said sorry, you forgave me, let's all move on. And while that is functional for small moments, it's really important to know that you're doing it. I think that's really the shift that happens when you see it. You become aware of it, and there is a, you can't, lovely thing about human brains, we can't unknow things. Once we've learned a thing, we know it. Like, maybe not true for like math or spelling or whatever, but
I mean, it might fall off the back, but
right. But very true for like real concepts rooted in the integrity of our like our systems aligned. Yeah. Are we out of alignment in this way that causes pain and chaos, or are we in alignment with our actual values? Yeah, like those are two states that all humans understand, whether or not we have words for it. We understand when we are like, I feel like people like, you're wrong. Like, when you have that feeling, and we can cover it up with a bunch of bullshit. We can realign in a different way that isn't quite right, but almost fits. And it's the same as like when you're a little kid and you're doing a puzzle and you're like, this one fits. No, it doesn't. Yes, fucking do.
Right. Oh yeah. I can justify it. I can defend it. I can, I can prove it right. I'm so, all the things.
Yeah. Listen, if there's any kid out there who was a Gen Xer and who didn't take the stickers off their fucking Rubik's Cube, like, you can cheat your way to feeling better. I'm not saying you can't, but it is, there's hollow victory in it, right? That you only get so far.
I never even thought to do that with my Rubik's Cube.
Oh my God. I would eventually break, and I was a little kid at the time it came out. And so I was like, well, what I want is the feeling of having achieved it. I don't even need to really achieve it. And that is like one of the markers of how deep and how connected your relationship is, right? So like, those kinds of more surface connection repair work in more surface relationships.
Yeah.
Right. They work well in like the professional settings. Hate that word, hate that concept. But like in a setting where you are trying to achieve a shared goal, particularly in capitalism, and all you need to do is restore stasis, totally works. Yeah. It works in a setting where you don't have to encounter the person a lot, and it's not going to cause disruption in either of your lives in a big way. Like, I'm not saying bring out the big connective heart guns for everything. I am saying it's, it is meaningful to know if, as you say, you were only seeking that kind of repair, that there's a level, there's a connection past that can feel more in alignment and can be more sustainable, more lasting. And that once we get past the pain of being bad at it and get into the practice of quicker, like a smaller refractory period, right? Where we have this spot where someone says, hey, you hurt me, ouch, I don't like that. I'm going to feel defensive. You take your pause, you realign, and it gets quicker to come to the space where you can see what is yours to hold on to in that moment. And you can see how much better it feels not to go into that pattern of surface repair.
Right. Right. Yeah, because the surface repair comes from that place of defensiveness. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, you said I'm wrong and I don't want to be wrong. So like, how do we fix this as soon as possible so that I'm no longer wrong?
Yes.
And that has nothing to do with like what you said, that like deeper layer of accountability, that like actual connection in the relationship. When you talked about earlier, I was like, oh yeah, like that's equivalent to like, oh, I scuffed your shoe. Like, sorry. Yeah. Like, yeah, we good.
Yeah, right. Or I came by your booth of beautiful things. I knocked one of them on the ground. It broke. Like, am I sorry? Yes. Should I make a repair? Yes. Is it a big deal? Not really. Are we gonna have process about it down the road? I hope not. Right? Like it's a different level.
When you came to my booth.
It really hurt me in my heart, right? Like understanding that I feel like a lot of times people look at this and they go, it's too daunting. I can't do this in my life because this is all I will do. It's like when I started somatic therapy a couple of years ago, I said to my therapist, like, I don't understand how people are crying all the time. Like, how do you get anything done, for one? But also, if I start having these emotional experiences, I won't be able to stop. And she said, because she's a genius, yes, that's the point. And I was complaining in my therapy this week about like how I just can't have comfort. Like I just want to be comfortable and I can't, and it's annoying. And she said, yes, but if you were comfortable, wouldn't that make you uncomfortable? And I was like, well, yes. And right, like this spot where if you are really able to sit back and not engage with these things, it is incredibly easy to get stuck there, and being stuck there is deadening to your soul, and it will make you eventually feel nothing. So when you layer all those, it's funny because the insulation of privilege, which is super real, it works both ways. Like you are insulated from consequence, but you are also insulated from feeling real feelings. And there's it inspired this deep disconnect that I think leads people to take more and more harmful actions in pursuit of feeling.
Yeah, in pursuit of pleasure, in pursuit of not having to feel the bad things and the negativity and the upset. And one of the things that is there is like this collection of emotions and things like that you're going to feel and they're never going to go away. That's being alive.
Yes.
That's what that is.
That is called human being. Yes. Yes. And the idea that we can code our emotions into negative and positive is part of the problem to begin with. Like every time you look for a system that is impossible for most humans to thrive in, it is because there are a deficit of possibility, and you're being told that there's a binary. Right? You are told it's a lie every fucking time. There's never a binary, but you are being told that there's a binary in your emotion of good and bad. There are good emotions, there are bad emotions. There are, and therapists will try to soften it to like, there are pleasant emotions and difficult emotions, or some way not try to hammer down into that moralistic space, but it is still the idea that anything that we don't immediately experience as easy is bad.
Right. We don't like it. It's bad.
Right. We don't instantly like it. That's the other thing, is it's not even that there is not something there to be savored.
Right.
There is meaning in our suffering. Like, and we remove that meaning by flattening the idea into this is a bad thing to feel. It's one of the reasons that people particularly in the US, but in American society, which I am disgusted to announce covers the globe, which is, it has infected every bit of the planet as we know it, that concept that should be taken away from everyday life, and that is not that grief is not a thing to be experienced in what's the word, when you want to be integrated. It is not integrated. And it is something that stands apart, is only experienced in certain settings, and you should go away and do it.
Right.
And
it's shameful. There's an aspect of
embarrassing.
Yeah, it's embarrassing. You don't ever want you to see yourself, we don't want other people to see you, like all these weird different constructs, because we don't make space for people to have emotions, particularly the negative ones. Yeah. I mean, it really is. It's like we're walking around in like this Stepford existence of I'm never gonna, like, I'm always gonna be happy. And
only.
Right. And it's like, well, I mean, it sounds nice on a poster, but when you think about it, it's like, well, what about all the other things that are in there? Like, emotional intelligence is being able to sit inside of the emotion and discover what's underneath it.
Yeah, it's very limiting to only find one part of the spectrum of human experience acceptable. And if it's unacceptable, it means it has to be subdued as quickly as possible. And one of the things that I find really interesting about like that intersection with pleasure and body and sex is that most people who dig into this as a concept, who are like, I want to have more, aware, conscious sexual experiences, know from personal experience that as soon as you start doing that, you're definitely going to cry while you're fucking. That's going to happen.
That's fucking, I'm sorry.
That's right. Like, you are absolutely going to experience emotions that you are going to code as negative. You are going to feel upset. You are going to feel over your limit. You're going to feel stirred up because you are untethering, you are burying all of these things that, a good but difficult book on the subject is The Body Keeps the Score. If you want something that's definitely kinder and better, but a little less sciencey and wonky, the Pleasure Activism by Jan Marie Brown strikes a chord, right? These ideas that our bodies are repository to all of our emotional experience, and that emotions don't know how to tell time, that we don't have emotions in the moment we are having the experience. Right. We have emotions in whatever moment they are tied to. Like, this is why people often talk about feeling like they're back in it when they talk about trauma, right? And so all of these ways of thinking and talking and being about bodies have to be aware of the traumas that we bring to any of these experiences. And that anytime you're interacting with another person's body, you're interacting with their whole experience. Right.
Oh, that's real.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us about, like, I know that how do we get more of fucking up better content? Give me all of it.
Right. So there's a link that is, at the last time I spoke on this, I was like, I just got to make a link. So I made a link that is, a non-linear, non-formulaic, like, don't take this as formula, none of this is gospel, very open source, very informed by people who I have learned so much from, and people whose work I wouldn't have any of this thought process without. One of the people who is directly linked in there is Mia Mingus, who is one of the co-founders of the Bay Area Transformative Justice Collective. And those, like, one of the things that I am very clear on in the work that I do, and when I talk to folks about these things, is that it is it's a tiny part of this very big body of work that's incredibly impactful. And honestly, like, I don't know if you could ever get to the end of it all. But asking the name of the books that
Yeah.
I mentioned. So the Body Keeps the Score. Johann, what the heck? I'm blanking on the author. It's the only one called that. But The Body Keeps the Score is a very white Western scientific, and I don't say scientific in a derogatory way, but it is, it's one of the ways of knowing what's going on in the world. It's a method of inquiry that I personally trust a lot, because if you can do something replicable, there's something in it, right? If you can do the thing and then I can do the thing, it is more of a usable tool.
Mm-hmm.
But that book really dives into like the ways that trauma in particular is linked in, not just to our brain and our memories. Not that our brain is not part of our body. I want to be clear on that. It's all one thing, but the way that it is also not just in the brain, that it is in other parts of our body and in other parts of our experience, and that really, really impacts sexual connection and sexual behavior in ways that it is good to be aware of when you're going to be having interactions with your own and other people's bodies. And also wait, now I'm trying to find the author's name. It is Bessel van der Kolk. He's very Dutch. I can't say his name. I say Google it. The Body Keeps the Score is the part that's easy to type. And then the other book is called Pleasure Activism, which is not really so much on the subject of trauma and how we store it and then how we are able to potentially work through it, but more on the I think the kids nowadays would say it's unpopular opinion that that doing good work for ourselves, our communities, our people, and our lives should be painful, and instead leaning into the pleasure that is available there. And Adrienne Marie Brown is like a really thoughtful writer who also wrote usually I can pull these things up. I don't know what my brain's doing today. I'll drop some links. But her work has always examined the connection between ourselves and the work we do, instead of, I feel like there is this desire often in like white Western model to remove the self from the discourse. And so it's really about being rooted and in contact with and in experiential space with our communities, right? So I think one of the things about this even little handout is it is about your connection, our connection to one another, our connection to community and to relationship. And I think often what people are looking for, when people go looking for things like this, it's because 99 times out of 100, somebody said, "You've harmed me," right?
Yeah.
And they're looking for a way to return to good graces. Yeah. They're looking for their way to what they perceive to be the other side of that. And what I hope that they come to understand from that is that there are no shortcuts to this kind of connection, that it is work that is lifelong and only done at human speeds, never at internet speeds.
Right. TV speeds.
Like, you think we can make our brains go that fast, but I have news for you. I have a very fast brain, and ain't no way. Ain't no way. That's not how bodies and brains work. That's not how integration works. Like, I wish, and bring on I'll put my brain in a jar. I'm ready. Like Black Mirror, here we come. But we don't actually live like that. We actually have to allow the work of apology and repair and connection to settle into our bodies, because the part where you just rush to forgiveness means it didn't settle in. And
Right.
so there's always going to be a little there's it doesn't, you know, it doesn't the bone doesn't set quite right, you know. So it is not to say that you can heal and not be changed. We are all changed when harm happens, when hurt happens. But there are ways to heal that are less ongoingly painful than others. And I think that often I compare it to setting bones, because we all know, whether or not we've broken a bone, that if you don't set it correctly, it's going to hurt more in the future, and it may never heal right. And if you do go through the painful process of correctly setting it, which does hurt,
Yeah.
you will then experience a better outcome. And I think like that's what this is a move towards, is better outcomes, and more often having a better outcome, so that you have a foundation to build on, to create authentic connection with yourself and others.
I love it. I love it. You, as you were sharing about that, you had mentioned earlier the bit about somatica, and like that whole aspect where I did some of that work, and like it really does, it takes you to those places in your body where things are stored, where, you know, like it just never healed, right? Like it's not set. And to be able to move through those spaces is so good and so yummy. And also getting that, like, this stuff is like, we don't let it go in that moment. And I've had so many moments during intimate moments where I'm like, oh my God, I want to cry right now. And sometimes they've been really positive, and sometimes they've been really sad. And like, it was one of those things where like, they don't put that in the movies. They don't, that's not the.
They try on HBO. No. Right? Like they're trying to get to it. But and that understand, it's the same thing like if you like body work, right? Getting a good massage, or any of these things. I've had a massage on the books with a dear, very talented massage therapist friend of mine. And basically she called me on my bullshit, because she's a dear friend, and was like, why are you putting me off? And I was like, because I'm going to cry and I don't want to. And I don't feel like it today. And understanding that like the ways that we limit ourself around emotion is a very incongruous thing to do, because we're animals, right? It's we don't shake off the thing and then and find out, you know, and get back to stasis, back to our baseline. Instead, we hang on to it. And in the same way that we hang on to things when we are distressed, like if you're ever really anxious or trying to get something done, like if you hold your pee, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't tend to your body's needs, like you don't eat on time, you don't drink enough water, you hold your pee, you do these things that are if taken to an extreme, kind of torture techniques, right? You deny yourself release in these ways that are all necessary. Like our bodies can't function without these things. And so those tears is the one that so much of the time it is like, there's such embarrassment in it. And it's kind of, I mean, I have that all the time where I'm like, I would never. Right. And it's such an interesting thing to feel that we need to hold on to. And I think that when we're seeking extreme pleasure through whatever means, you know, I talk about this a lot with using substance, right? Like doing whatever we're doing to achieve an altered state. I think it is very true with sex that we are trying to break through those self and other imposed barriers to a more like raw state of ourselves, right?
I love what you said about release. Like it's so real. When you said that, I was like, oh yeah, you know, like tears and holding your breath and holding your pee. And I was like, also orgasms.
Oh yeah, edging.
It's like that. It's totally a release. Like there's all this other thought that goes into it, but like that's
Yeah.
what it is. It's crazy. So just
Yeah.
being able to release and let yourself go in all these moments. And yeah.
It's our human desire to always return to salt water, right? The ocean, tears, blood, sweat, come. It's all salt water.
I love that. Okay. Is there anything that you want to say about Folsom Street?
Yes, we've got some stuff coming up. We're returning to our little art focused kink and alt sex centered street fairs, which are in collaboration with Folsom Street, which is our org, the Leather and LGBTQ Cultural District, which is another org Soma that is kind of what the name implies, working on leather culture in the neighborhood, and the Soma West Community Benefit District. We collaborate to put on these small art fairs, and the reason we collaborate to do that is so we can underwrite a good deal of the costs so that it's accessible to artists. We make a really big point of censoring racial and gender equity in our choices of vendors. So you will get a beautiful array of crafts people and artisans, and maybe one of them's on this podcast. Yeah, come out, see the gear, see the sexy things. That kicks back off in April. We were on, cold weather. We did some inside events on the second Saturdays, but we felt like it was a little too chilly for folks to be out there all day. But we'll be back on April 9th. That is on 12th Street between Harrison and Folsom. One end of that is the Eagle, which is, recently received historical designation in the city of San Francisco. So one of our, leather anchors in Soma and in San Francisco. So they're going to be doing a special beer bus the day of. There's also going to be a leather swap and like secondhand gear sale, which is great because it acknowledges, and not just leather, it's an overarching term, but it acknowledges that a lot of these things, a lot of these toys and outfits and fun, delightful ways that we, express ourselves are fucking expensive. And so it's a nice way for folks to access stuff if this is a new idea, or if this is a, something you're not sure you're even going to like, or if this is something you like but you can't afford. Like, that's a great way to have access to like some more financially accessible stuff. So that's pretty cool. And then our two big flagship events of the season are going to be, while still, COVID modified, we're not putting people right on top of each other like we did in the before times. We are still it is still our intention to be vax checking and asking people to carry masks with them in case they find themselves in long standing crowded spaces, because we really don't know where we're going to be with variants and stuff by then. But you can also check out our website to see if that changes closer to the date. But we are always the last Sunday of July and the last Sunday of September. The last Sunday of July is known as Up Your Alley, also AKA all the locals call it Dory Alley Fair, which is much smaller, much more block party feeling, way filthier. It's the party for the pigs. It is such fun, and it is really a space where the leather, kink, and alt sex community of San Francisco really shines. So if that's something you are into, brace yourself and come out on July 31st. And then the big old daddy of Folsom Street Fair. We did last year we did a rebranded nod to our roots, bringing Mega Hood back for a year, but this year we're back with Folsom Street Fair in the streets, September 25th. It's a Sunday. This year we're going to have some really cool things added on that we haven't had previously. We are going to still have 5 community stages, which I was super proud of last year, that each community stage was both highlighting a different part of our community, but also run by, and all of the talent was directly from community. And that was so beautiful to see. And we're planning on adding in, nothing's signed yet, but this is like the rumor has it. We're planning on adding in a cannabis garden this year, as well as a queer focused wrestling ring. So should be some fun stuff that's coming up. And lots of ways to get involved. We also opened last year a community center in Soma on 9th Street. We have all kinds of events there, from very small to very dramatic and large and beautiful. The next thing that is happening there is Twisted Windows, which is a local rope performance collective, is hosting an event called Happily Ever After, which is a fairy tale themed rope and bondage. I don't know. I think of it as like the Cirque du Soleil of kink. Like they're going to do some really beautiful things with all kinds of beautiful people. And that's coming up at the Folsom Center. And there are things like that all the time. So one of the best ways to follow what we have going on is follow us on Instagram. We're just Folsom Street. Also, we are Folsom Street on all the socials. But our website is folsomstreet.org. That gets, as with many small, mostly volunteer run things, not update as often as we'd like, but that is where the updates will land, especially as we get closer. If you're interested in participating in some way, you're interested in volunteering, you're interested in vending, you're interested in coming in to support the fact that we have the Center for Sex and Culture Library and Archive at our center, where there's books and magazines that are really difficult to find and access anywhere, because it's a curation of our shared history. So we're doing some cool stuff. We'd love for you to come do it with us. Come over. We like having friends over. And if there's something that you're wanting to see happen in community, a great way is getting involved. We're just about to launch our first community advisory board, which I'm calling the Folsom Street Vision Board. Jeez.
Nice.
Super cute, too cute, almost too cute. But yeah, we're really intent on continuing to center the community in our work, and the only way we can do that is to hear from our community. So we're always asking for your input.
Beautiful. Well, I'm here for it. I will be there. I'm gonna use that vision board business. Borrow that. Oh my God, Angel, thank you so much for being a part of the show today. This has been a fantastic conversation, and I know that as all the work that you do, it's going to ripple out and make a huge difference in the world. So
thank you. It was my pleasure. It was so fun to chat, and I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
Everybody who's listening, come out, chill with us in the street. It's gonna be fun.
I'll be there.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. The ItCast is our community outreach podcast that increases diversity in conversations on health and sexuality. Through this work, we are creating a world where all people feel loved, honored, and respected. You can register for the Healing Through Pleasure series starting May 11th with Queen Reverend Mutima Imani and spiritual guide Asara Sahai, where you will discover the power of your erotic energy and expand your pleasure. You can get tickets on Eventbrite. Check it out through our website at theitcast.com. Also, ask us anything. We want to hear from you. Please send in your questions, your comments, your ideas. We've got a survey link in the comments, and just please stay in contact with us and be in community. All right. You can get access to our bonus content on Patreon at patreon.com/Nika Sherelle. Support the ItCast and all the work we do at theitcast.com. Subscribe to this YouTube channel right here and share with your community. See you next week.